In 1963, Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman to reach space, spending nearly 3 full days orbiting Earth. Fast forward to today, Sunita Williams just returned from a grueling 9-month mission aboard the ISS. And now, Blue Origin is calling a group of celebrities who spent 11 minutes floating around the edge of space astronauts. Something doesn't add up, and it's raising serious questions in the aerospace world. The story of human spaceflight has always been about courage, precision, and truth. But lately, those lines seem to be blurring. Around the world, space tourism is booming. What once belonged to a handful of trained explorers has become a billion-dollar experience. Private companies now offer ordinary citizens a chance to touch the edge of the atmosphere for a price. It's an incredible achievement in accessibility, yes, but also a confusing one, because the media, eager for headlines, now calls almost anyone who crosses 100 kilometers above Earth an astronaut. The same word once reserved for those who endured years of training, isolation, and danger just to keep humanity's presence alive beyond our planet. The question is not whether these commercial passengers deserve respect. They do. The question is what happens when language, science, and symbolism collide, when the boundaries between exploration and entertainment are redrawn by marketing departments instead of mission control. This video isn't about mocking anyone. It's not about shaming joy or curiosity. It's about understanding. Because there's a difference between celebrating inclusion and rewriting history. We'll look at what makes a real astronaut, what defines a mission, and how powerful corporations may have changed our perception of space itself. So before we jump further, take a moment and ask yourself, when someone spends 4 minutes floating above the edge of space, does that make them an astronaut? Because truthfully, the answer might surprise you. So what does it really take to earn the title of astronaut? For most people, space looks simple. A rocket lifts off, floats above the Earth, and comes back down. But real spaceflight, true orbital spaceflight, is something entirely different. To become an astronaut, the journey begins long before the rocket leaves the ground. Years of physical, technical, and psychological training shape a person into someone who can survive and think under pressure unlike anything on Earth. Astronaut candidates spend hours spinning in centrifuges that simulate the crushing forces of launch and re-entry. They train underwater to simulate weightlessness, calculating every movement with precision. They undergo survival courses in deserts, jungles, and freezing tundras, preparing for landings that may not go as planned. And yet, no simulation truly prepares them for the reality of orbit. Once they're up there, every second counts. Astronauts aboard the International Space Station don't just float around enjoying the view. They repair solar arrays, run critical scientific experiments, and maintain an environment where even a tiny mistake can be catastrophic. Life in space is not glamorous. It's physically punishing. Muscles atrophy, bones weaken, sleep becomes fragmented, and mentally, being isolated in a closed module with the same people, thousands of miles from home, can be tougher than any physical test. Astronauts like Valentina Tereshkova, Sunita Williams, or Chris Hadfield spent months circling the planet, facing radiation, exhaustion, and technical risks that could mean life or death. They didn't just reach space, they lived in it, mastering the systems that kept them alive and pushing the edge of human endurance. Real missions are built on purpose. Every orbit serves research, progress, or exploration. Even something as simple as a maintenance walk outside the station is a calculated risk, requiring hundreds of hours of preparation. Now compare that to a quick 4-minute float above the Kármán line, a moment of excitement followed by the descent back into comfort. It's not about diminishing anyone's experience. It's about perspective. Because when you truly understand the sweat, precision, and sacrifice behind genuine spaceflight, calling a suborbital hop a mission suddenly feels very different. And that's where the question sharpens. If you can touch space without truly living in it, does the title still mean the same? On a calm morning in West Texas, Blue Origin's new Shepard rocket stood tall against the rising sun. Cameras flashed, commentators spoke with excitement, and 6 passengers climbed aboard, ready to make history, or at least headlines. The mission's name was NS-31. In the capsule sat a mix of well-known figures: a former journalist, a social advocate, a business figure, and a few invited guests. None were trained astronauts. Their preparation: a short safety briefing, basic seating instructions, and an overview of what to expect during the short ascent and descent. Once the engines ignited, the capsule climbed for roughly 2.5 minutes, piercing through the atmosphere. At around 100 kilometers, it crossed the Kármán line, the internationally recognized boundary of space. Then, engines cut off, and silence filled the cabin. For about 4 minutes, weightlessness took over. Laughter, cheering, and pure joy echoed inside. They unbuckled, floated, filmed the view, tossed small objects back and forth, and shouted in awe at the curve of the Earth below. It was a beautiful, human moment, brief but sincere. Then just as quickly, the capsule began its descent. Atmospheric drag slowed the fall, parachutes deployed, and within 10 minutes of launch, the crew was safely back on Earth. Smiles wide, applause loud, and headlines instant. 6 new astronauts returned from space. Technically, yes, they reached space, but there were no manual controls, no flight duties, and no mission-critical tasks. Every aspect of the launch and landing was fully automated by computers on the ground. The passengers were not trained to intervene if something failed. They weren't responsible for data, procedures, or safety systems. And that's the subtle truth most people missed. The NS-31 passengers experienced space, but only as guests. They didn't command, repair, or contribute to the flight in ways that define professional astronauts. They witnessed the edge of human achievement without having to build it or depend on it for survival. It doesn't make their achievement meaningless. It makes it different. And as the cameras kept rolling, that difference soon became the center of a growing debate. Because when everyone can be called an astronaut, what happens to the meaning of the word itself? The moment Blue Origin announced the NS-31 passengers as astronauts, social media lit up. Major news outlets celebrated the mission with glowing headlines. 6 new astronauts join the legacy of explorers. Comment sections filled with congratulations and confusion. Scientists, engineers, and space professionals began asking a simple question: why are we calling them astronauts? According to the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, the title of commercial astronaut isn't just about crossing a certain altitude. Until 2021, passengers had to demonstrate activities essential to public safety or human spaceflight operations. In other words, you had to do something mission-critical, not just go along for the ride. But that rule quietly expired in 2022. Since then, companies like Blue Origin haven't needed to apply for astronaut wings at all. So now, the definition exists more in headlines than in law. Sean Duffy, a former NASA systems engineer, summed it up perfectly. When everything works automatically, and all you do is sit and enjoy the view, you're not an astronaut, you're a traveler. That single sentence went viral. Petitions appeared online demanding the FAA reintroduce strict criteria. Training veterans from NASA and Roscosmos criticized the way companies used the label to inflate marketing campaigns. Even astronauts themselves voiced unease. One retired commander wrote, "Titles carry responsibility. If everyone's an astronaut, then none of us are." Still, others argued this new wave of participants represents progress. Proof that space is becoming open to all, not just an elite few. The debate tore through both worlds, the scientific community defending precision and the public cheering accessibility. It wasn't hostile, it was philosophical. Yet beneath the surface lay a deeper tension, because while commercial heroes celebrated their missions, real astronauts were still training for 6-month deployments, facing constant risk, and flying workhorse vehicles like Crew Dragon under grueling pressure. And here's the catch. Even NASA, once known for awarding symbolic astronaut wings, didn't recognize the NS-31 passengers. They didn't meet the standard. They didn't perform duties that justified the title. That silence spoke louder than any press release. Which brings us to the core question every space enthusiast, journalist, and dreamer must now face. If not by altitude alone, what truly defines an astronaut, and who gets to decide where the line is drawn? The word astronaut comes from the Greek roots astro, meaning star, and nauts, meaning sailor. In its purest form, it translates to sailor of the stars. For decades, that title carried a sacred weight. It symbolized mastery, training, and human daring, the kind that pushed us beyond gravity's grasp. But definitions evolve, and as private spaceflight expands, so does the debate around what truly earns someone that name. From a technical standpoint, the FAA's last formal guideline was clear. To qualify as an astronaut, one must demonstrate activities critical to public safety or contribute to human spaceflight operations. It wasn't about crossing an altitude, it was about contribution, being responsible for systems, maneuvers, or safety. Professional astronauts embody this to the core. Their every action in orbit, every calculated step or command, directly affects mission success. That's what separates a passenger from a participant and a traveler from a crew member. Yet there's another side, a symbolic one. The more open access to space becomes, the more people want that identity to include everyone who's looked down at Earth from above. For many, being called an astronaut isn't just about science. It's about belonging, representation, inspiration, the thrill of feeling closer to the impossible. That desire comes from a good place, but good intentions don't rewrite definitions. When we start stretching words too far, we risk diluting the stories built by those who earned them through sacrifice. It's not exclusion, it's precision. Think of it this way. If a tourist visits a hospital, we don't call them a doctor. If they sit in the cockpit of an airplane, we don't call them a pilot. The same logic must apply to space. Experience alone does not equal expertise. When Valentina Tereshkova orbited the Earth for 70 hours, she carried humanity's hopes and fears. When Neil Armstrong stepped onto the moon, every molecule of that moment was tethered to training, engineering, and sheer human endurance. Those achievements defined the word astronaut. So what happens if we start handing that same title to anyone who buys a ticket? Because if we begin calling joyrides missions, how long before astronaut becomes just another marketing term, one stripped of its integrity, its risk, and its meaning? The question isn't whether space should be open to all, it's whether the words we use keep honoring those who got us there. And in that sense, defending the definition isn't an act of gatekeeping, it's an act of respect. To understand the full picture, we need to look at two companies shaping the era of private spaceflight: Blue Origin and SpaceX. Both were founded by billionaires with dreams bigger than Earth, but their philosophies could not be more different. Blue Origin, created by Jeff Bezos, focuses primarily on suborbital tourism. The company's new Shepard rocket is a marvel of reusability and design. It takes off vertically, gives its passengers a brief glimpse of space, and lands safely back on the pad. Each flight lasts about 10 minutes. Smooth, elegant, and perfectly marketable. It's designed for accessibility, to give anyone who can afford it a taste of weightlessness and the view of a lifetime. SpaceX, on the other hand, built its legacy on orbital flight, missions that circle the Earth, dock with the International Space Station, and deliver crews who live and work in orbit for months at a time. Under Elon Musk's leadership, SpaceX developed the Falcon 9, Crew Dragon, and now Starship, an entirely new class of spacecraft intended for long-duration missions to the Moon and Mars. In August 2024, SpaceX completed its 13th crewed mission to the ISS. Each lasted around 6 months, involving scientific research, hardware installation, and meticulous maintenance under microgravity conditions. The company's focus isn't the thrill of touching space for minutes. It's about staying there, building a sustainable future for humanity beyond Earth. Meanwhile, Blue Origin's record shows fewer than 24 suborbital launches, most carrying tourists, celebrities, or symbolic guests. Each flight covers barely 1% of the distance an orbital mission travels, and the experience is over before most traditional astronauts have even completed a single orbit. The contrast isn't meant to embarrass, it's meant to clarify. SpaceX's missions demand astronauts. Blue Origin's experiences serve passengers. One organization pushes forward the frontier of exploration. The other packages that frontier into a product, yet both play a role. Blue Origin inspires public imagination, reminding us that space no longer belongs only to governments. SpaceX, meanwhile, ensures that the human footprint in space keeps expanding in tangible, lasting ways. So when we see two companies using the same language, crew, mission, astronauts, we have to pause, because the words are the same, but the realities behind them couldn't be more different, and that's why the debate matters. Not to judge, but to keep truth anchored in perspective. Because how we define progress today will shape the way future generations understand what it truly means to go beyond Earth. So, what makes someone an astronaut? Is it the altitude they reach, the courage they show, or the purpose they serve? Maybe it's all of it, but not equally. Real astronauts represent discipline, sacrifice, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. Space tourists represent possibility and human curiosity. Both matter, but they're not the same. We can celebrate how far access to space has come, yet still protect the meaning behind the word that once defined humanity's bravest explorers. Because when words lose meaning, history loses weight. Truth fades into marketing, and that's a trade humanity can't afford. The pioneers who risked everything deserve for that line to remain clear. So now it's your turn to decide. Do you believe the NS-31 crew earned the title of astronaut? Why or why not? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's keep this conversation honest and respectful. And if you enjoy exploring truth beyond the headlines, subscribe for more deep dives into the real stories of science and space. After all, curiosity is where every great mission begins.